Welcome to Aaj Kal America. My name is Inderjit Kalirai, and we talk on Aaj Kal America about what is the current affairs of the USA. Aaj Kal means yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And on this discussion, we have Proposition 50, which is a fairly hot potato in California. There's quite a few discussions on why we should vote yes on Proposition 50. There's quite a bit of discussion on no. But to educate us on this, is joining with us is Mark Meuser. He's very active. He's a lawyer. And before I say too much, which it may be incorrect, I'm going to invite Mark. Mark, welcome to Aaj Kal America. And give us an introduction to Mark and Proposition 50, and then we'll go deeper into it.
Great. Thank you very much. As you said, my name is Mark Meuser. I'm an attorney with the Dillon Law Group. And the Dillon Law Group has been we are a very political firm. We do a lot of political litigation. I have represented in the past, and our firm has represented in the past, President Trump, the RNC, the California Republican Party. I've represented many congressmen. As a political firm, we're involved quite often with constitutional law issues. We're involved in political law issues. And so Proposition 50, I am personally of the position that we need to be voting no on Proposition 50. And to help those people who are not following California politics, what is Proposition 50? And I will start off with this. In California, we have a thing called the Citizens Redistricting Commission. And every 10 years, we have a United States Census. As a result of that census, Congress says how many congressional seats each state gets, and each state then divides their state up so that way you can elect your congressman. Now, every year that ends with a 0 is when Congress does, or when the United States does a census. Every year that begins with a 1 is when states will do redistricting. Some states, the legislature does it. Other states, like California, has a commission that redraws those districts. So California has a commission. It's called the California Redistricting Commission. That is under our California Constitution, says that they are the ones who are responsible for drawing the lines for congressional districts. Now, we'll get into this later, why we're doing this, but in August of this year, the legislature decided that they wanted to take that power back, and they wanted to redraw the congressional lines that will be in effect for the next 6 years. And then in 2020 or in 2030, we would go back to the process where the commission would redraw the lines. And so what the legislature is asking the voters to do with Proposition 50 is to allow them to have redrawn the lines, and they will have redrawn the lines, and they'll show these are the lines that you are approving. So they're asking the voters of California, please disregard what the commission did. The hundreds and thousands of hours that the commission spent drawing lines, ignore those lines and accept the lines that we drew in just a couple hours as being the lines that we're going to elect our representatives for the next 3 federal elections. So 2026, 2028, and 2030. And then we'll go back to the commission in 2032. So without going into the history of what led us to that, that is basically what Prop 50 is. Prop 50 is a vote of the people to endorse Gavin Newsom's plan of abolishing the districts drawn by the commission and instead put in the districts that were drawn by the politicians, for the politicians.
Right. I appreciate the clarification and the detail there. The question I have related to this, when this commission gets put in place, we had this happen in 2020, and the commission came out in 2021 with the current districts we have, who decides who is on this commission?
Okay, per our Constitution, the commission is up of 14 individuals. 5 people from the party that has the most registration in the state of California, Democrats. 5 from the party that has the second most individuals, which would be the Republicans, and then 4 individuals from either of the parties that are not mentioned or independents. And what is happening is anybody who wants to be on the commission submits their resume to the, I believe it's the state auditor. I think it's, if I remember right, it's the state auditor, and they go through all the applications. They weed out the ones that clearly are not qualified to sit on the commission. Then they do a round of interviews and down to, I think it's, they're supposed to boil it down to like about 70, 80 people. Then of the 70, 80 people, I believe they're randomly drawn the first, I think it's like the first 8 people or something like that. And those 8 people then meet, and from the complete list will then pick the remainder up to 14 based upon the guidelines. So if the first 8 people happen to be 4 independents and 4 Republicans, they are going to now pick who are the 5 Democrats and the remaining Republican, or, vice versa. So it's the commission select main. So I think the first part is like a lottery from the big group, and then those people from the big group will select the ones that they are best. So that's generally how the commission, who's on the commission. In order to be on the commission, there's a couple of things that you have to do. You have to have voted in like 3 of the last 5 elections or something like that. So I haven't looked at the commission details in about 6 years, but that's generally what they are.
Well, I appreciate that too. I think the follow-up question I would have is, this commission technically is only going to work once every decade. So the last time was 2021, the next time will be 2031. And the question is this going to be a new set of commissioners come 2031?
Yes, every 10 years, we select a new set of commissioners, and there is for 10 years. So in 20, I'll talk about the commission that we currently have. In 2020, they were going through the process while the census was doing their data. They were going through, they were starting to meet. They were appointed, they were starting to meet, they were starting to gather details. And when they finally, in 2021, got the census data, then they went to work. But during 2021, they started off with meetings called Community of Interest. They would come into, let's say, San Joaquin County, and they would have a meeting with all the commissioners, would be in the room, and people could come up and say, hey, the people of San Joaquin County, we're, a rural, community. We want to be kept together. We don't feel like we should be shoved up with Sacramento, or we don't feel like we should be shoved up with the, Contra Costa County in the Bay Area, because that's a completely different district than San Joaquin County. Or we don't want to be tied in with, Fresno, and different people will just get in, and it's called community of interest testimony. And that went on for months on end. And then when they finally got the data from the census, then they actually started map drawing, and they would present, these are the maps that we're looking at, and the community would come in and say, we don't like this line, we think the line should be moved over here. And because congressional districts have to be within 1 vote of each other, the congressional district 1 and congressional 52, they have to be within 1 registered voter of each other, or not registered voter, 1 population, because you could have an area that has a lot of kids, and so as such, they may have more population but less voters. But the population numbers can only deviate by 1, either direction, +1, -1. And so when you start changing lines, okay, if we're pulling out of this district to move this line up, then that means this line has to expand. And so it is a very complex process that they go through just on drawing the congressional meetings, they met 18 different days across the state at different locations just to deal with the congressional districts. But at the same time, they were also doing state Senate seats, state assembly seats, and state board of equalizations. So they were drawing 4 sets of maps at the exact same time. And so this process took them from middle of September of 2021 all the way till December of 2021. And then, then their job's not done because now they have to start doing reports about what they did. They had to file a formal report. They're not meeting as often as they did in 2021. They might have like quarterly meetings, but they do meet. And if at any point in time there is a lawsuit against the commission and a court decides that they violated the law in drawing those lines, then the commission would have to go back and redraw those lines. And so, as such, a commission that gets brought in 2020 term expires in 2030, and a new commission is going to come in 2030, and their term is going to go all the way through 2040. And so I believe in 2028 is when people can start submitting their applications for the 2030 process.
Got it. And all of this process is technically designed to have a commission that is proportionally representative of California voters, whether it be Republican, Independent, or Democrat, or Green Party. So basically, we're going to have 14 members who are a cross section of our community, and they're going to decide one way how these districts are drawn. There's no bias because there's no additional vote that can go red or blue. The ballot that we have coming up on November 4th, I believe I heard you say that if it's successful, it will impact the 26, 28, and 30 elections for Congress. And in defining those commission duties, responsibilities, which impact the local legislature, assembly, senate, and then the board of equalization, those districts these people are drawing to. What's coming up in Proposition 50 on November 4th, those other districts, those other California local legislature and the local board of equalization, or they are not impacted. Basically, they're going to stay as they were designed in 21. Only impact is to the congressional. And yes,
That is
okay,
correct.
we can see that it technically will impact 26, 28, and 30. What are the chances that the legislature might turn around next year, and say we're going to do away with the commission anyway?
Nothing other than the fact that they would have to put it before the voters, and the voters would have to vote it out of the Constitution. The legislature just couldn't say, we're going to get rid of the commission. Because the voters put it into the Constitution, the voters would have to take it out. But there would be nothing that would stop the legislature from saying, hey, look, we just got the voters to allow us to draw the lines. We like this power of drawing the lines. We don't like how the commission drew the lines. The commission in the Constitution says thou shalt not look at a party's race in drawing the lines. Thou shalt not look at the address of where politicians live in drawing the lines. The legislature could say, we don't like those restrictions. We like to look and draw lines so that way we have Democrat seats. We want to make sure that we jam every possible Republican 1 or 2 districts. We understand that we can't win those seats, but that means that we can win even more seats. So it's the concept of the politicians being able to select their voters. And if the voters of the state of California were to say, yeah, we think that politicians should be allowed to do this, then yes, they could do that. Now, whether or not they want to do that or will do that, that's a question for another day. What we know right now is that Proposition 50 is before the voters. And as you said, yes, it only affects the congressional races. And I think this is a strategic decision that they made, because if you live in California, you have seen the advertising on yes on 50, no on 50. And one of the things that the yes on 50 are arguing is Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, and we need to pass these maps to to protect our democracy. Because what they are saying is Texas redrew their congressional districts. And because Texas redrew their congressional districts, and as a result of redrawing those congressional districts, it ended up creating 5 new Republican seats, thus 5 less Democrat seats. What Gavin Newsom is trying to do is blame Donald Trump, to say, hey, give me this power to redraw the lines the way I want to draw them, because it's Donald Trump's fault. The thing is, and I'd like to go into this in a little bit more detail, because it's very important to understand that what happened in Texas is not what's happening in California. And I'm going to summarize it like this, and then I'm going to go into detail. Texas was under threat of litigation because their congressional districts violated the United States Constitution. So they followed the legal process that is in their state to redraw the lines. As a result of redrawing those lines, they now have constitutional districts. So they had unconstitutional districts that they followed the Constitution to create constitutional. California has not been under threat of litigation. For all intents and purposes, the districts that we were residing on were legal. But Gavin Newsom had to violate our Constitution in order to draw partisan districts that are now going to be subject to litigation because they are unconstitutional. And yes, that you heard that correct. I will be bringing a lawsuit. If this passes, I will be bringing a lawsuit the very next day after the election to sue Gavin Newsom that these new lines are unconstitutional. So again, Texas had legal line or illegal lines that they followed the law to make legal, and California had legal lines that they did not follow the law to make illegal. California and Texas are 2 different things. And in order to understand that, I now need to go back in time and help you understand what's going on in Texas. So first off, in 2021, Texas has the census data just like California had the census data. In the Texas legislature, under their constitution, they are the ones who are supposed to draw the lines. So they followed the law. And there was like an 1988 decision of the Fifth Circuit. And actually, before I get to that, I need to go back to a 1965 law that's called the Voting Rights Act. In the Voting Rights Act, Congress passed a law that says there has been racism in this country, especially down in the South. And what we have been seeing legislatures do is that they will take a community of Black people that if the district compact around where they lived, they would be able to elect a Black representative. But what legislatures were doing is they were cooking that population. And so they would send, let's take 1/4 of them and put them in this congressional district, 1/4 and put them in this congressional district, 1/4 in this one, and 1/4 and put in this one. And that way, no Black will ever be able to be elected to Congress. That is the world that we're dealing with in 1960. And to deal with that problem, Congress passed the Voting Rights Act. And they said, hey, you must draw congressional districts if the minority population lives close enough to each other and there is enough of them that if you put them in the same district, they would be a majority. And you'll find that there is past racism regarding this particular group of minorities. And if you have all three of those factors, then you must draw a district for them. Well, that has kind of become, and by application, it's kind of become, well, if you have enough minorities that live in an area that's the majority, then we're going to draw you a district. And it's kind of what we call the voting rights district. And we never seem to really get at the second and the third factors. But what ended up happening is in 1988, the Fifth Circuit came down with a decision that said, we understand that sometimes there's not enough black people in an area that they would naturally be able to have a congressional district. But there might be some brown people or Latinos in the area. And if you take two minorities, you put them together, you can create a VRA district that way. And the Fifth Circuit said you can do what are called coalition districts. So because the Fifth Circuit over Texas, the Texas legislature said, okay, we're drawing the lines. Here are 4 coalition districts, brown, black. There's not enough Latinos to make a voting right district. There's not enough blacks to make a voter right district. But if we put them together, we will make a voting rights district of those 2 minority groups. That was the case law that was in effect in 2021. Now, what happened is Galveston County had the opportunity to redraw its lines for county commissioners. And when they drew the lines, they decided to do something radical. Let's not look at race at all. We're just going to draw fair lines. We're not going to look at party politics. We're not going to look at race. We're just going to draw the lines based upon where the people live and what makes sense for, for travel patterns and geographical aspects of our county. And Joe Biden sued Galveston County and said, no, if you take this brown population up here and this black population over here, and you draw a funny gerrymandered district, you're going to have a coalition district. And you shall file, you should have created this. So he took them to court and said, I am suing Galveston County because they did not create a gerrymandered district, a gerrymandered coalition district to make sure that the Latinos and the black had this coalition district for them set aside. That case went all the way up to the Fifth Circuit. And in August of last year, 2024, the Fifth Circuit said, you know what? After we made our decision back in 1988, several other circuit courts have looked at this issue, and they said, these coalition districts violate the United States Constitution of the 14th and 15th Amendment, which were designed to make America a colorblind society. And so, as applied, the VRA does not require you to make coalition districts, because doing so mandates that you draw districts around race as the predominant issue. And that violates the 14th and 15th. And they said, the Fourth Circuit has done this. The Sixth Circuit has done this. We actually need to follow the example of our sister circuits. We were making the law, not we as the court were an overactive judiciary trying to make the law. We realized that back in 1988 we made a mistake, and so we are overturning that decision. And the new decision is you cannot create coalition districts. What ended up happening as a result of that is that Harmeet Dillon, who used to be my boss at the Dillon Law Group, what became the head of the civil rights department at DOJ. And a couple weeks after she was sworn into office, she sent a letter to Greg Abbott in Texas and said, hey, the Fifth Circuit has said you can't have these coalition districts. You have 4 of these districts in Texas. You need to fix this problem, or else I'm going to sue you, and the court's going to make you fix the problem. So, do you want to waste a bunch of taxpayer money and do this next year? Or do you want to do it this year and save that money? And Abbott said, you know what, we got this special session of the legislature, let's just do it now. And so there was these 4 coalition districts in Texas. And if you understand, one of the districts went clear around Dallas, started at Fort Worth, kind of came around Dallas, and it was just picking up all the minority communities. Another one in Houston was like this huge donut, except from between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock was Gap. And then it went out and came down in the peninsula. They're just really gerrymandered districts. Well, surrounding these gerrymandered districts were very strong Republican districts. And so when all of a sudden you're no longer drawing districts to create these super gerrymandered racial districts, and now you're actually drawing them compact with their communities, instead of having, I think one was the Crenshaw district, instead of him having a seat that he won by 20 points, now it's a seat that he may win by 10 points. And the congressional seat beside him, instead of them winning by 25 points, now maybe they only win by 15 or 10 to 15 points. And because you're now drawing these compact districts and not drawing a seat strictly based upon race, these 4 seats that were across the state of Texas, these coalition seats, now became Republican seats. Yeah, the Republican seats around it were now not as strong Republican seats, but the one seat that was in question now becomes a Republican seat, as the lines got redrawn. But you say, wait a second, Mark, there's only 4 coalition seats, and didn't you say that Texas drew 5 new Republican seats? Well, if anybody's been following the news in Texas, they understand that Hispanic vote has been going from Democrat to Republican. And there was a seat near San Antonio, which was a Democrat seat, but moving Republican as the Hispanics have been changing their vote tendencies. And so the legislature looked at this one particular district and it's like, in the next 4 to 6 years, we're going to be able to take this seat with the trends. But why wait 4 to 6 years? If we change these lines over here, since we're already messing with lines in the state, if we change just these lines in between San Antonio and Austin, if we just change them slightly, all of a sudden, what has been a Democrat-leaning seat now is going to become a Republic-leaning seat because we're just shifting some neighborhoods in redrawing these lines. And since we're drawing the lines, we're going to go ahead and, because the Republicans, they don't want to waste millions of dollars trying to flip a, lean Democrat seat to a lean Republican seat. That's going to be a lot of money, a lot of time. Let's give ourselves a political edge. We'll call it what it is. It is political. But they saw an opportunity by just shifting a few lines to, we're already having to do this work about our 4 unconstitutional. We might as well shift the lines here and take this other seat that we're going to take in the next couple elections. Let's just make sure it doesn't cost us millions upon millions upon millions of dollars to do it. So that's what Texas did. So when Gavin Newsom says, we are redrawing these lines because of Donald Trump in Texas, really he should be blaming Joe Biden, because Joe Biden got greedy in Galveston, Texas and said, hey, I want there to be this minority coalition district. He understood that the 4th and the 6th Circuit has said that these are unconstitutional, but he wanted to further double down upon the principle of needing these coalition districts. And because he did that, he gave the courts an opportunity to review, and they decided, you know what? We were wrong back in 1988. We need to follow the example of our sister circuits that have looked at this more recently in much more detail. And as such, because of that review, we have now reached the conclusion that we were wrong in the past and we're going to fix that problem. So Gavin Newsom should not be blaming Donald Trump. He should be blaming Joe Biden. But that doesn't meet his political goals. Just as Texas, it's like we had to fix 4. We were going to get 4 seats no matter what. But for political reasons, we decided that we wanted a 5th seat. Nancy Pelosi was one of the biggest donors and biggest opponents against this independent redistricting commission. She has never liked this. She has wanted to get rid of this commission for a long time. And so here is her opportunity to do so. Blame Trump. It is pure politics what is going on here. The commission drew lines that already favored the Democrat congressional districts. If you actually go in and if you were to draw the lines in California, just based upon counties and cities and not trying to divide them up based upon race or anything like that, Republicans would have probably close to 20 to 22 congressional districts. But they only have 9. Why do they have 9? Because the way how the commission drew the lines, drawing around race and stuff like that, it created an environment where it was very favorable to Democrats in the state of California. But even that is not enough. Even though the commission drew lines that were favorable to the Democrat Party, it's not enough. They want more. And so in a way, for Nancy's dream to get rid of the commission, let's start with blaming Trump. Let's go in there and let's make this state, let's deprive the voters of the state of California of even more Republican representation. And that is why it is pure politics what Gavin Newsom and the Democrat Party are doing. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump destroying democracy. If anything, remember, if you look at our California flag, it says that we are a republic. The United States of America, we pledge allegiance to the republic. We are a constitutional republic, and when in a constitutional republic, what that means is that there are limitations upon the democracy, upon the majority, the mobocracy, whatever term you want to use. It's not, we don't, in a democracy, the majority rules. In a constitutional republic, there are limitations on what the majority can do. And that's why we have representatives. And so what is going on is Donald Trump is not destroying democracy because Texas took care of unconstitutional districts in a constitutional manner. Gavin Newsom is taking legal districts. He's making them illegal in an unconstitutional manner of how he is doing it. And so what we have to understand is that what he is doing is pure politics. The voters of the state of California had said in 2008 and 2010, we do not want politicians playing politics by selecting their voters. We're taking this power from the politicians. And what Gavin Newsom says, I don't like this limit on my power. I want this power to draw the lines in a way so that my party can select their voters. And because we, as the almighty party in power, select our voters, we can ensure that we maintain our power for years to come.
Mark has given a extreme detail of where this competition between Texas and California is coming from, and the legal ramifications and the causes for Texas's legal challenges, and the solutions they've taken. And just to summarize one component of this, Texas has taken a seat which technically, according to the Constitution, according to the federal and the state laws, is legal. But because they're redrawing to become legal on the other 4 districts, they've decided to bring this extra one in, which maybe spiced up the pot for California to say, hey, this is where they're cheating, and now they're cheating. We have to cheat too. Those are my words. But Mark is educating us on all of this, where it started, where it's going. And just where we left before the break, Mark had told us sort of the history of Texas and the constitutional amendment that we made for our California Redistricting Commission. Over the last couple of days, Mark, our prior governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, has walked in on this too. And he's had this discussion about the constitutionality and the legality of what we have as a California Redistricting Commission. And he has explained also that Proposition 50 is breaking that, or is now making, like you said, something that's legal and turning it into something that's illegal. I believe that most of this publicity, like you've explained, that Gavin Newsom and the Democrat Party and the Democratic spokespersons, they're saying, some of the people I've spoken to, is what this Proposition 50 is, it's not right. But we have to do it because Texas is cheating. Therefore, we have to compensate what Texas is going to do. Arnold has come back, just like you have done, and spoke on this. Moving forward, you've already said you would vote no on it. What can we expect out of the November ballot? California to be in turmoil still? If they adopt these commission, not the commission, sorry, if they adopt Proposition 50 through the voters, I heard you say that you have a lawsuit that you're going to file against California or Newsom. What type of turmoil or tidal waves will we go through? And will there be sort of a cancellation if the judges decide of this Proposition 50 districts and reverting back to the California Commission districts?
Great question. Basically, redistricting litigation happens across the country. Right now, the United States Supreme Court is actually hearing a case on October, I think it's 15th. It's in the case of Louisiana versus Calais, and it has to deal with how they're drawing their lines. And so that case has made it all the way to the Supreme Court. And this has to do with lines that were drawn, 5 years ago, or 4 years ago, I should say, lines that were in effect for the 2022 election, 2024 election, and the Supreme Court is going to make a decision on it. And based upon that decision, they may go back down and redraw lines. So while California has not been subject to any litigation over the lines that they drew in 2021, if the voters vote yes, there are some very bad lines that were drawn by the legislature, especially in the Central Valley. And for anybody who knows the current maps in the Central Valley, San Joaquin County is almost entirely one congressional district. San Joaquin County, under the new maps, are split into 5 different congressional districts. And one of those districts is District 9, and another one of them is 13. Now, 13 is a district that kind of starts at north of Fresno and comes all up into San Joaquin County, and it's almost like a middle finger coming right up the inside of San Joaquin County, and pulls out all the Hispanic neighborhoods and leaves everything else, but just pulls the Hispanic neighborhoods down into this district that includes Merced and Madera counties. I think Stanislaus County is in it, but it's I call it the middle finger that Gavin's giving to the voters of San Joaquin County, and so it's very clear that in drawing this line, if you put a heat map of where the Hispanics live, the lines are literally drawn perfectly to pull in all the Hispanic neighborhoods into Congressional District 13 and pull them out of Congressional District 9. So these people who live in Stockton, who live and work in Stockton, can't vote for a representative from Stockton, because most of the population is going to be down in southern in this district. So most likely that congressman is going to come from further south. And so they are having their vote of who in Stockton best represents them, who in San Joaquin County best represents them. And because of their race, they've got yanked down into this other district. Congressional District 20 and 22 is down, covers, Bakersfield up to the Fresno area. Both of them kind of do. One's kind of east and one's kind of west. But in Congressional District 22, what we see is around the city of Hanford, all the white neighborhoods kind of got shoved into 20, and all the Latino districts got shoved into 22. And it's like it's this weird line that when you compare it with racial maps, it's very clear that they are pulling the Hispanic districts into one and the white districts into another, and that would violate our 14th and 15th Amendment. And I could go on and on and cite examples like this across the state of California where these new maps were drawn with race in mind, and meaning that race was the predominant factor. And so as such, when if the voters vote yes on forgiving Gavin Newsom for drawing maps when he wasn't allowed to do so, if they say, yeah, for the next 6 years, we're going to accept these temporary maps, which, as you so correctly identified, once they get this, what stops them from just getting rid of the commission, or in 2032 saying, hey, we don't like these maps, we're going to just redraw them and let the voters vote on the maps that we draw. There's nothing temporary about this process. It's going to set precedents of what's going to happen. So the voters need to vote no and just shut down and do not let the politicians think that they can just overturn the commission whenever they want, when they think that there can be better lines. But if the voters vote yes, there will be a lawsuit filed. There'll probably be multiple lawsuits filed, but I am aware of one that will go to the Equal Protection Clause under the 14th and 15th Amendment. And as I told you earlier, right now there's a case before the United States Supreme Court, the Calais decision. And that decision may come out, during the same time that we're dealing with Prop 50, or it could come out after Prop 50, or it might not come out till next June. We don't know when the decision is going to come out by the Supreme Court, but that decision could actually affect the Prop 50 maps. It could also affect what the commission drew. And we may, based upon that decision, we may have another lawsuit that comes at the commission and says, hey, now based upon the court decision in Calais, you have lines that are unconstitutional, and we're going to sue you and force you to redraw the lines. I mean, that is a possibility of how this all could come about. I can't tell you what's going to happen. I just know that because these new lines were drawn in a racial fashion, they are going to be subject to future litigation. And that future litigation, maybe the court will decide, hey, we're going to just go back to the old commission maps. Or that decision could say, you know what, even the commission maps are unconstitutional. We're going to just send it back to the commission, and they have to redraw the entire state. I can't tell you what the court's going to do. I can just tell you that because Gavin Newsom has done this, he has now subjected the state of California to millions of dollars of legal work that's going to now have to be spent to defend old and new maps, and it's going to put California through litigation that it did not need to. California already has budget deficits that they're trying to deal with, and yes, there is a cost of running the special election. There's costs that if these districts go into place where they're going to have to redraw the lines, and there's some administrative costs associated with that. But there's also going to be a cost of litigation that's going to last for probably the next several years that would not have been but for Gavin Newsom deciding that he wanted to become president of the United States, and the best way that he could do that is by being front and center in the news. And so by wasting the taxpayer dollars in this fight against Donald Trump. Gavin Newsom got to set the terms. Hey, it's Trump's fault. And so by framing this argument as Trump's fault is an opportunity for him and his campaign for president of the United States to set Donald Trump as his false foil and start throwing barbs at Donald Trump, how Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. Right now, you could live outside of California. You could be living in Washington, D.C., and you are seeing ads for no on 50. Why? Because Gavin Trump is fundraising, but he's also trying to help his presidential campaign by showing him fighting against Prop 50 where voters don't even live. He's truly trying to fundraise, but he's also trying to build his name recognition, showing himself to be a champion who's willing to fight Donald Trump in places where voters can't even vote for Prop 50. It is a waste of money, except in Gavin's mind, because it is an opportunity for him to build his name recognition and build his donor database. So that way, when he runs for president in 2028, he has a step up on all of his Democrat challengers.
Got it. On this lawsuit possibilities post November 4, is it likely that we could have these districts as drawn by the legislature be effective for the primary coming up in June, and the courts decide that that's wrong, we got to go backwards, and for the general, the current commission drawn districts are in play? Is it possible that whoever may win the primaries come June may be looking at representing a totally different district come November 26?
No. If we don't get a decision by about February from a court saying no, the new lines don't take effect, then we would run 2026 under the new lines. And if the court made a decision, let's say in September, that the new lines were unconstitutional, it would take effect in the 2028 elections that we would go back. So our plan is to try to get it before the courts so that a decision is made on new versus old lines, try to get that decision done by Christmas so that everybody who's running for office would know, whether they're running in the new lines or the old lines. And if you get past February and the courts have not made a decision, then you would basically be dealing with, again, if the voters vote yes on Prop 50, and if the courts do not make a decision by February, which I think is very unlikely, because there are some certain statutes that kind of require them to act quickly on these cases. So if they don't act quick enough and make a decision, and we don't get it through the appeal process, so there's several ifs. If that were to happen, and in 2026 we were operating on the new maps, and then the courts were to make a decision that the new maps were unconstitutional, it would be the 2028 that we would revert back to.
And on that basis, then, those people who win the congressional seats as drawn by California legislature would be competing or be back in the race for 28 with new districts, and that would allow sort of California voters to fix, maybe in one form or another, what 26 might have done. So I think where I'm going with this is we may have a one-term congressional representative because of these districts, and then the courts turning them back to what they were with the commission-drawn districts. But I would say with that, the damage that could be done, or what Gavin Newsom wants to do, will be done. And then 28, he's running for the elections again, and it becomes his manifesto, it becomes his ammunition, whatever we want to call it, for the 28 race. Look what I did. Maybe not talk about how the courts overturned it. The ramifications that come from this for the voters, are there any sort of things that sort of might impact them post November 4th, other than we may be hit by lawsuits as a state and any media publicity that will keep coming at us? I I don't see, other than the representative we may not want being there, any other impact to the general populace of California.
I would say not to the general populace per se, but understand that California has 52 congressional districts. Now, when you have competitive congressional districts, what ends up happening is a lot of money gets spent. And so, where you have competitive congressional districts, both sides start spending money to make sure that their message gets out to the voter. When you have seats that are now deemed non competitive, the Democrats don't spend money on them, the Republicans don't spend money on them. And understand that most money is spent at for a governor's race or for a congressional Senate race. Now, if all of a sudden you stop spending money, and I'll keep picking on San Joaquin. Now all of a sudden, because they divided San Joaquin up into 5, it's no longer a competitive district. Okay, before it was kind of a competitive district, and a lot of money was being spent, campaign money was being spent in San Joaquin. Not only did it mean that you had a more educated electorate there, but it also affected the down ticket races where people were now paying more attention to those seats, and those seats became more competitive. And so when all of a sudden these new maps, which take, and I don't remember the exact number, but let's say there was like six or 9. I think there was 9 competitive congressional seats in California. Several seats that were Republicans were going to win no matter what, more seats that the Democrats were going to win no matter what. But now there were 9 competitive seats. Well, 9 out of 50 is roughly 20%. 20% of the state was having this very competitive elections with a lot of money being spent and opportunity for a lot more political dialogue. Under these new maps, it's only 2 competitive seats. So we've taken it from 20% down to 4%. That means only 4% of California is going to be living in a place where there are these competitive seats. And that means most of the state's down tickets, the state senate, the state assembly, your county commissioners, the level of dialogue for politics in the state goes down, which is going to hurt our state because we already live in a state where the political dialogue is muted because there's such a super majority right now by the Democrats. And so it actually does hurt our state that less money is being spent on getting messages out and letting the parties push their ideas. Because if only one party is getting their ideas out because they're the only party getting an election, they're going to keep pushing the ball in their path. If there's no opposition pushing back against it, it's just going to keep, there's no accountability. And so one of the dangers of Prop 50 is that it removes a level of accountability, because most voters of California do not pay attention to the day-to-day activities of their legislatures. You really need the other side to be able to push back. And what Gavin Newsom is doing by these new maps is he's taking it from basically 18 to 20% competitiveness down to 4% competitiveness, thus removing obstacles from him and his party being able to push their agenda. Right now the legislature is in a huge deficit. Why are they in a position of huge deficit spending? Is because there has not been a distance to them that's been able to push back. And so the more that you allow one party to just shove their agenda with no restraints on it, the more it is eventually going to hurt the voters of California, because at some point in time, the piper's going to call. at some point in time, we're going to have to pay. And so I'm probably getting a little bit deeper than you expected with this answer. There are some indirect ramifications of what's going to happen if these lines go into effect. I don't think very many people understand that level of politics to understand that by doing so, they're going to hurt themselves in the long run. It probably puts our state into some sort of recession that's going to take austerity measures to bring us out of it. But I mean, I remember, I think it was 2008, where we went into austerity measures because the state couldn't pay its bills. And that very likely, if there's any kind of national recession, could trigger the state to the point where the state's issuing warrants instead of issuing checks, and where all of a sudden they can't, your tax refund is basically an IOU from the state that says, we will pay you someday for this money that we owe you. But I don't remember how much people remember that. And this, we don't live in a market forever. We don't live in a bull market forever. The markets change. And the California's current deficit that we're dealing with coincides with a major recession on the national level, it could have some terrible effects on Californians that nobody's predicting.
Well, thank you, Mark, and I appreciate your time on this and the detail that you've shared on how we got to Prop 50 and what its consequences may be. From this discussion, one thing I have got is I don't think it was Donald Trump that called Governor Abbott to tell him to do this. I think it was other people who may be substituted for Donald Trump, but that's my view. But I want to thank you for your time and thank you for all this information. I appreciate everything, and hopefully we've managed to share some information about why 50 is on the ballot and which way we seriously need to vote on it. The only thing I can add on there, the people say yes for Proposition 50. They do add a little thing in there. Oh, this is not right. We shouldn't be doing it. But now that we're doing it, we should vote yes. So I think you've educated us in detail on where the 50 issues are rooted in Texas, what Texas has had to do because it got itself in some deep well, and it's now trying to get out of it. But California is saying, oh, they're trying to do this without talking about their history. And because they're doing it, and they're doing it because Trump told them to do it, now we have to do it because Gavin Newsom is telling us to do it. So appreciate all your time. Thank you. And maybe we'll have a discussion after November 4th and see what's going to be happening after that. So I appreciate your time. Thank you, Mark. And if you want, if you can, anyway, I'll ask you offline. You've been watching Aaj Kal America, Sanjhi Soch TV. We've discussed Proposition 50. We talked about what brought Proposition 50 to where it is today in California. It's going to be voted on by the voters on November 4th. We've had Mark Meuser join us and educate us on what the links of Proposition 50 to California and Texas are. We are being told that California's Proposition 50 has to be on the ballot to make it fair for what Texas is doing wrong. And Mark has, in detail, educated us where what Texas is doing is not necessarily wrong. They're fixing a wrong. But I want to appreciate Mark's time on this and the detail that he's gone into. We look forward to talking with Mark after the November 4th election and see which way we might end up going. But thank you for watching Aaj Kal America and this discussion. We'll join you next time. We'll take your leave now. Thank you.